gentlemen, welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets. Now here are your hosts, Tim McMaster and Connor Hughes. Listen safely.
Can't wait.
YouTube viewers, check out the description below the video. All of our great sponsors, click on the links and help us out with that. The dust has settled on the NFL draft, and now that we've caught our breath, it's time to take a look back on what may have been a special 3 days for the New York Jets. Tim McMaster along with Connor Hughes and Marissa Dunn, who is back from Las Vegas. She did not strike it rich. In fact, she tells us she didn't gamble at all. Marissa, come on.
Sorry.
All right.
She came back with something.
While Marissa's coughing, make sure you leave us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to the YouTube page as well. We're up over 5,000 subscribers. Let's get it to 10,000. That is next. Marissa, are you okay?
I'm okay. Yeah, no gambling, but I did get to see Dane Brugler in action, which was much better than hitting it big at the slots. He was awesome to watch and listen to. And I hear, I'm not sure, but I hear the Jets won the draft. Is that a thing?
That's sure what it sounds like. I think that's absolutely what it sounds like. I mean, it's surprising to see the sheer amount of universal praise from just about everybody. I mean, it's not just media. It's not just in New York. It's not just on the East Coast. I mean, it's everywhere, to the point where I actually told somebody over in the building the other day. I was casually sitting there, and an executive, a director of pro personnel for an NFC team, one of the guys I've gotten to know pretty well over the years, gave me a call after the draft just to kind of shoot the shit and talk for a little bit and catch up. And he turns around and halfway through the conversation, he goes, "Hey," he goes, "I meant to tell you, your boys over there are doing a pretty damn good job." So it's it's not even just the media fodder, because obviously, look, media are going to blow up. The Jets have 3 first-round picks, right? I mean, everyone's going to say, "Oh my God, they did a great draft because they got 3 first-round picks," all those things. But this is actually all around the league. People are taking notice of the Jets. I mean, other teams and other conferences are taking note of the Jets and looking over here, seeing what Joe Douglas is doing and saying, "You know what? That's pretty impressive."
So if you were on vacation under a rock somewhere else and are just getting back into your Jets fandom, here's how it shook down. 3 first-round picks, as Connor mentioned. I'm on Sauce Gardner, number 1 at the 4th pick, the cornerback out of Cincinnati. Garrett Wilson, the receiver out of Ohio State, with the number 10
I had a coffee
pick.
delivery. Sorry for that, Tim. I had a
right.
coffee delivery, and Bree didn't want to go on camera. And then she started yelling at the dog because the dog was in here. It's she's fine. She just sits in the corner and doesn't do anything. But yeah, sorry about that. Go on.
All good. They trade back into the first round, get Jermaine Johnson at number 26, the edge rusher from Florida State. Day 2, it was Breece Hall at 36. They traded up for that, the running back out of Iowa State. Then at 101, they got Jeremy Ruckert, the tight end out of Ohio State. And then on day 3, a couple of 4th-round picks early on, they go Max Mitchell, finally going with an offensive lineman, Louisiana, and then Micheal Clemons, another edge rusher out of Texas A&M. That's how it shook down, Connor. One thing that I thought was interesting, Robert Saleh on Saturday, after everything was kind of said and done, with an interview, I think it was with SNY, and they were just talking about how the draft turned out, first round. And he said that if Wilson had actually gone number 8 and Drake London was there, the Jets probably go with Jermaine Johnson at 10. And to think about that, to think if Garrett Wilson just goes 2 picks earlier, they get Johnson, they probably don't trade back into the first round. It really changes everything just because of one little thing there in the first round. Who knows what players we'd be talking about right now, but that's not how it turned out. But it was interesting to hear Saleh kind of admit to what they would have gone, what direction they would have gone if that had been the case.
Yeah, it's funny. Obviously, there's you hear rumors and you hear rumblings and all that going into the draft, and I think the one that was the worst kept secret, or the one that was universally shared by just about every single person you were going to talk to, or talk about, was that how much the Jets loved Jermaine Johnson. That was the one that was just universally shared by everyone, whether it was different teams, different scouts, different media members, it was almost like Joe Douglas loves Jermaine Johnson, and if he loves him that much, and he doesn't think he's going to be there at 10, could he potentially move up and get him at 4? And it was the talk, and it was running rampant. It was how much the Jets love Johnson. And there's reason for it. I mean, this is a guy, he's a little bit older, He's on the older end of side for rookies, obviously, but he is almost a perfect tailor-made fit for this Jet defense, right? I mean, he's an attacking, ferocious pass rusher. He is the most pro-ready pass rusher, or was the most pro-ready pass rusher in the draft, Robert Saleh believed, and he told us. And they believed that taking him and putting him into this defense, putting him into Robert Saleh's defensive scheme, that wide 9 Washburn defensive front, is just going to unlock and untap what this kid's capable of. And it is a little surprising and a little like noteworthy that the Jets had this top 10 grade and were ready to take this kid top 10 overall. And he was still there at 26, which is why I think we talked about this in the last podcast. Honestly, the last few days all kind of bleed together over what I said and where I said it. But there was a lot of talk about, why Jermaine Johnson slid. Why was he available there at 26 when the Jets were able to get him there at 10? And there was another team that was picking top 10 that was one of the teams that was believed to be in contention for Johnson that was going to prevent the Jets from getting him. So it was one of those teams, top 10, that was like, oh, if the Jets don't take him at 4, he's going to potentially go here, or he's going to potentially go here. And I talked to one person who was an executive over on that team, and I was like, during the draft, and I was like, hey man, like, I thought you guys were going to be in the running for Johnson. He's still there at 2021 right now. Like, what's going on? Why is this kid sliding? And the way that he described it to me was that from a person standpoint, like a personality standpoint, there were no concerns with Jermaine Johnson. But the reason why he slid, and he said I think it was more media hype that elevated his stock than it was his actual stock, because he is a little bit older. That comes into play. He didn't have a ton of production at Georgia, and the amount of production that he had didn't peak and didn't come around until he went to Florida State and the FC or ACC. So he went to Florida State and the ACC. That's when suddenly he blows up. He goes, that's a little bit of a cause for concern, a little bit of a red flag that you didn't do it in the SEC. Now you go to the ACC and suddenly you're all world. And he said the other thing that made us not want to draft him that early was when you look at his production and you see the number, you break up analytically exactly how he was able to get his production. There were a ton of sacks. Obviously, I think it was like 11 or 12 he had as a senior. There were not a lot of quarterback hits. There were not a lot of quarterback hurries. Quarterback hurries and quarterback hits are replicable. So when you hit the quarterback and you hurry the quarterback, that's usually a sign that it's going to be replicable. And then eventually those quarterback hits and those quarterback hurries will lead to sacks. If you have all 3, hits, hurries, and sacks, that's a good thing. When you just have sacks and you don't have a lot of quarterback hurries and you don't have a lot of quarterback hits, or the hurries and hits are not, they don't add up with the number of sacks you have, sometimes what that will tell NFL scouts and NFL evaluators is that you might be, quote unquote, lucking yourself into sacks. You might just have, all right, you got a dominant rush on the right side, which pushes the quarterback left up into the pocket and he's right in your lap and you get a sack for that. You didn't hit the guy. You didn't hurry the guy. You didn't get into his face. The quarterback just kind of rolled into you and you were the one that brought him to the ground. So a lot of sacks without a lot of quarterback hits and hurries will sometimes scare some teams off because they don't think that's replicable. Compared to if they have a lot of hurries and a lot of hits, that will tell them, okay, you know what, we can work on this guy. He just needs a little bit faster step, and those sacks will come. The old Casey Rogers line of like sacks come in bunches. If you have the hits and the hurries, the sacks will come in bunches. Those weren't necessarily there with Jermaine Johnson, which is why he started to slide. That's how another team felt. That is not how the Jets felt. I think I made this pretty clear. The Jets were one of those teams where they loved this kid. They loved his personality. They loved his makeup. They loved the way that he's going to fit within Robert Saleh's defense. They love that he's cocky, but not cocky to the point of it being a detriment, just to the point where he believes so wholeheartedly in what he's going to accomplish, what he's going to do on the field, that he's going to take his play to another level. And I think I said this before, like where we talked about Kayvon Thibodeau, who ended up going 5 to the Giants. KT was not an option for the Jets at 4. He was not an option for the Jets at 10. And he was not an option for the Jets at 4 or an option for the Jets at 10 because they knew if they were going to take a pass rusher at 4 and 10, they were going to take Jermaine Johnson. They had a higher grade on than KT. So the fact that they were able to get this kid, where they got this kid, and add him to the massive haul of picks of Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner, it really was. I mean, look, honestly, anything that happened rounds 2 through 7 on would have been a cherry on top for Joe Douglas and the Jets. Instead, he went from those first 3 picks to then rounding out the draft in a way that it is, I will be completely honest with you. Aside from 1 or 2 commenters in the Athletic comment section, I have not been able to find one person who has a down or negative word to say about this draft for the Jets. It really does look like a home run hit. Obviously, we got to see how these kids develop. Obviously, we got to see how these kids actually play in the NFL. but from a what the Jets did, where they were picking, and the potential of this group, it's the best draft I've ever seen a team put together in my time covering the NFL, dating back to 2014. And it's certainly the best draft the Jets general manager has had since 2014. So now let's see what happens with it.
Yeah, it seems like the only other team that's getting kind of, hey, they won the draft credit is the Ravens, who just like on sheer quantity, they like 11 guys coming out of this draft.
But even you look at the guys that they picked, though, like Tim, like they had the Ravens draft, right? Like they draft that guy, the guy who has like who's a top 10 player who ruptures his Achilles tendon in the on his pro day. So then they end up getting him in the second round. Then they come back and they grab the pass. Like they don't ever draft sexy. Like very rarely do they draft the receivers or the corners or things like that. They just find these value picks and they continue to add these value picks. And because of how good the Ravens have been for so long, because of how that's this stretch run that they've been on, really since Ozzie Newsome has been that general manager, where they're kind of like the Steelers in that they're never a bad team. They're just varying degrees of good. They're in this position where they really are set at most roster spots. Like, yeah, you can find weak spots. Yeah, they can improve some places, but they're set in so many ways where when they are on the clock, they really can take the best player available. Like they really can do that. They then develop that guy for a year. And when the player in front of him leaves in free agency, you now have the player that you drafted in 21 or 22 filling in 22, 23, 24 and stepping in as the starter. And it's this awesome little rotation of talent, which is why you very rarely see the Ravens be players in the free agent market or the top tier market of free agency, or where they let some of their guys go like they did with Zadarius Smith when he walked, or like they did with Matt Judon when he walked, because they have these players that they've drafted and developed who they're now ready to step in and fill in and take over and be starters. And I remember talking to Joe Douglas during like the Jets always set up these like off the record powwows where like you can just talk to the GM for like 20-30 minutes at these different league events. And I remember talking to Joe about free agency in this upcoming draft. Like, hey, you're gonna be more like, are you feeling the heat? Like, are you feeling the heat that you have to turn this up another level? That you have to feel the pressure to put some winners on the board, like where you have to spend a little more in free agency? And he said, no, we're gonna stay being aggressive. We're gonna stay being aggressive. But he said, ideally, the goal is that eventually we become the Baltimore Ravens. That we want to become a team where we round out our starters with talent. And then we have depth, and then we have game changers. But as those starters get to a point where maybe they're going to fetch a contract in the free agent market that we don't want to pay, we can let those guys go because we got someone in the pipeline that we can eventually replace them and do. And that's why you have you can go every single year. You look at what the Ravens do in the draft, and you can say the Ravens are winners in the NFL draft because they never reach for anything. They'll take the other interior offensive lineman. They took that 6'8" tackle from Minnesota, who I thought the Jets could play. They added him to the board. Like, he's probably starting for this team in 2 years. Like, they just constantly draft the best player available. They trust their system, and they let their free agent walk to replace with the players. And it's when you combine a franchise quarterback like they have in Lamar Jackson, a franchise head coach like they have in Harbaugh, and then a hell of a front office like they have, which of all of those guys have cut their teeth from Ozzie Newsome. You get an organization like you have with the Ravens, which is what the Jets are trying to replicate here in Florham Park. It's just going to take a little bit to do what the Ravens did, because this is going back, 10, 15 years to when they started getting this ball really rolling.
Yeah, remember Lamar Jackson, not even high, right? He dropped in that draft, right?
It's the smart drafting, though, right? Because he was good when they draft him 32nd, right? So it's the smart drafting. Yes, but they trade up into the first round to get Lamar Jackson. The reason they trade up to get Lamar Jackson at 32 instead of waiting for the first round to end and then just getting him in the second round, which they easily could have done, is because now they get the fifth-year option. So it's the next level thinking. It's the years down the road thinking of, okay, maybe Lamar makes it, maybe Lamar doesn't make it. But if he does make it, we now have him on a fifth-year option. Then we have him on the franchise tag. So it's 2 extra years of team control compared to if they waited until the first or second pick of the second round. They lose those 2 years of team control. It's wild. It really is fascinating. It really is fascinating the way that they work. And if you want like a long road, how do you think the Jets are going to be running in 5-6 years if this thing really works for Joe Douglas and these guys? It's the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, that is the mold. That's what you want to do. All right. The guys we didn't talk about from the draft, Connor, in our podcast over the weekend was the day 3 guys. So we should touch on them. Finally, they go offensive line with Max Mitchell out of Louisiana and then Micheal Clemons. But Mitchell, 111. And the cool thing about these picks for the Jets, even though it's day 3, they're both 4th rounders fairly early in the 4th round. So they're still guys that you have high expectations for. So what are the expectations for Mitchell? The only negative I heard was that he has the short arms. No one wants to have short arms on the offensive line. But other than that, it seems like he's a fiery guy that fits what this team's looking to do.
Yeah, I heard from one person inside Jets building who said that this was one of his favorite picks of the entire draft. Like that he really like the two names that I heard that were favorites. Like kind of just start polling the people that you know in the building, and you kind of say like, oh, who do you like? Who do you like? Who do you like? Who do you like? The two resounding ones that kept coming up over and over and over again of like the non-obvious ones is I heard a lot about Ruckert, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I heard a lot about loving him and him being literally the number one tight end on the Jets board and then being able to get him in the third round. They were thrilled with that one. So we'll talk about that in a bit. And then obviously Mitchell. Like I heard a lot about Mitchell and these guys really liking Mitchell. And the reason for is that I don't know if Mitchell's ever going to be a starting offensive guard for this team. If he is, it's probably not a great sign because it means that Lakin didn't develop and Elijah didn't develop. But I don't know if Mitchell's ever going to be a starting guard. I don't know if he's ever going to be a tackle. The Jets certainly hope he's never going to be a starting tackle because that means that Fant and Becton both developed. But what they did in adding this guy is they added a player who they believe does have legitimate upside. They added a player who they believe has serious versatility because he can play both guard positions, both tackle positions. The only spot he can't play up front is center. And he's somebody who, if you develop and you put the time into him and you get him moving in the right direction a little bit, over the course of the next 4 years, throughout the length of this rookie contract, you now have a player who can play at left guard, left tackle, right tackle. And that versatility, that depth, that ability to play all of those positions on the offensive line, fans often and media fans, everyone like talking heads, we sometimes get so caught up in like the starters, right? And the stars, and you want the game changers, you want the all pros, you want the dynamic players, you want the, oh my God, look what this guy is. Holy cow. You got the Jefferson, right? And you got the Jalen Ramsey, and you got the elite playmakers. You got the Jamar Chase. Like, yeah, you're like, those are the players that sell tickets. Those are the players that steal highlights on ESPN and NFL Network. Those are the players that everyone wants to draft on their fantasy teams. But among the reasons why the Jets have been in their year after year, decade plus long rut is not just because they're defunct of game changers and not just because their starters aren't very good, but because they don't have any depth. So when they have these average to slightly above average starters, and then players like Corey Davis go down for a little bit, or players like Mekhi Becton go down for a little bit, or George Fant goes down for a little bit, or Breece Hall, or he's played every game, but like the corner, Brandon Echols goes down for a little bit, or Marcus May goes down for a little bit. Among the reasons why the Jets have all of their problems are because there's no depth behind these guys either. They don't have starters, they don't have game changers, and they don't have depth. So when you don't have stars, and your starter who's filling in as a star goes down, and then you have to have the depth fill in. Well, the depth isn't good anyway. So now you're really just already you're a step below the competition. Now you're 2 and 3 steps below the competition because of who you have out there. So Joe Douglas, when he took on this 6-year contract for the Jets, this undertaking, this massive undertaking of rebuilding this team and getting this team back to prominence, it wasn't just about finding the stars. It wasn't just about the starters. It was about rebuilding the depth behind these guys. And Mitchell goes a very long way in doing that. He's a depth piece. He's never going to be the star. He's never going to be chanted about. You'll probably have some hardcore fans that are like, he should be getting more minutes. Elijah Vera Tucker had a bad game. Put Max Mitchell in. You're going to have that. But the way that the Jets view this guy is that they just added a player in the 4th round who for the next 5 years is going to develop and lead to a minimal drop-off if something happens to Fant, Becton, Vera Tucker, Tomlinson across that offensive line. And that's an incredibly valuable piece to have.
And then the next pick, 6 picks later, is Micheal Clemons, the edge rusher. So they go back to the edge for more rush out of Texas A&M, obviously an SEC guy. Just talk about how he fits.
It's funny. Like I literally wrote this sentence on like the final day of the draft, and I tweeted about it too, where like we've now reached a point in covering the Jets where I felt the need to criticize this team because they went with more playmakers in the 3rd round in running back and tight end and another pass rusher with their final pick in the 4th round in Clemons, outside pass rusher, defensive end, instead of addressing safety and interior defensive line. Like they didn't address safety and interior defensive line.
And we can go there too, because that was actually my next topic was why didn't they draft a safety? So if you want to just throw that
it's not. There's nothing sexy to that answer. It's just it's the best. There wasn't a safety on the best player available to the board. Like they could have gone with the kid from Oregon or Penn State, but they went with Breece Hall. You know what I mean? They could have gone with an interior defensive lineman here, but they like the upside of Clemons. But We it was not long ago that it was every single year this team seemed like they were drafting a 34 defensive end in the first round, whether it was Mo Wilkerson or whether it was Sheldon Richardson or whether it was Leonard Williams or whether it was Quinnen Williams. And I remember every single year when they would draft these guys top 5, top 10, whatever the hell it was, sitting there and thinking like there is one defensive tackle there were 2 defensive tackles, 34 defensive ends who were like, I think worthy of being a top 10 pick. And it was Aaron Donald and JJ Watt. Those are the 2 across the entire NFL that were just so ferocious game changers that they, in my opinion, were of greater value than the equal defensive end. You know what I mean? There's no other. You can say that the kid from his name's escaping me. Jones, I think his last name is, the kid from Kansas City. The really good defensive end from Kansas, or defensive tackle from Kansas City, was playing 34 defensive end, then switched to defensive tackle, then they moved him back to defensive end.
Chris Jones.
Yeah, Chris Jones. He's a dominant player. I would take Nick Bosa over him every single day of the week. It goes back to when the Jets drafted Quinnen Williams. And my argument with drafting Quinnen Williams was like, yeah, Quinnen Williams might be the best player on the board, but Josh Allen was there too, the pass rusher Josh Allen. And I was like, you know what? Even if Josh Allen's maybe a tick or 2 below Quinnen Williams in terms of like your overall grade, in my opinion, getting that pass rusher, he's going to make more of an impact on Sundays than your 34 defensive end. Plus, at the time, the Jets already had Henry Anderson, Leonard Williams, and I think it was Steve McClendon in the middle. So I was like, all right, you add Josh Allen. Now you put Josh Allen next to Leonard Williams. Now you get Quinnen Williams. Now it's like, okay, who's going to play where? You know, it's like a who's on first, and then you're throwing Foley Fatukasi as well. Like, who's going where in this situation? So I remember like just not believing in like, just don't take the interior defensive lineman anymore. Take them. And we had drafts where it was every single year the Jets were taking the 34 defensive end or the defensive tackle, and or it was the draft in with Jamal Adams where they went safety in the first and second round, 2 non-premium positions, 2 positions that really don't make that big of an impact on Sundays. And the Jets drafted them with their first round pick and their second round pick. And I'm sitting there, I was like, man, I'm about to criticize a GM because he chose to draft more pass rushers and more playmakers and more offensive line depth instead of a safety and defensive end. And that one got deleted really, really quick. And I was like, there is no criticism. If you want to say like they should have done this, fine. But at the end of the day, man, you just got another pass rusher to give to the pass rusher crazed defensive-minded head coach Robert Saleh. And with Clemons, I mean, this guy is a fascinating player. I think he is, and we talked to Joe Douglas about this after the draft. He is somebody that they believe is a first-round talent. Like, they believe that this guy was a day 1, day 2 talent who fell to them on the final day of the draft with their final 4th-round pick because of the fact that he had injury issues, because of the fact he's a little bit older, because of the fact that he has off-field concerns. Like, he got arrested, what was it, twice in like a 6-month span or something like that. Like, He was arrested twice. Like, there's some off-field issues. There's some obviously injury issues. There's some age issues. But from a performance standpoint, from just a talent standpoint, if you just look at the football player in a vacuum, the guy's a day 1, day 2 pick. I mean, he is a nasty SOB when he's going after the quarterback. He has speed to get to the passer. He has a ferocious bull rush move to get to the passer. He is just, like I said, nasty. He's just a nasty SOB. And the Jets wanted to get nastier on both sides of the line. They wanted to get nastier on the offensive line and nastier on the defensive line. And Clemons might be one of those dudes who piss off a lot of offensive linemen. He might be a guy that gets 1 or 2 defensive personal foul penalties throughout the course of the season. But they're going to take it because they're going to love it. Because this is a kid who, if they're able to keep him healthy and keep him on the right track off the field, you're just adding another pass rusher to this team's disposal. And I know, like, I was surprised at the number of Jet fans that got kind of worked up and ornery with me after the draft, because, you know, I tweeted out like just how crazy the depth chart has changed from 2019 to 2022 in terms of just how much Joe Douglas has been able to adjust the starters. I mean, the only starter that is that started in 2019 that is still on this, still starting in 2022 is CJ Mosley. Quinnen Williams was also part of that 2019 team, but he was on a rotation. So the only starter was CJ Mosley. He's changed that all. So when I wrote out the defensive starters, I wrote out the Jets' base defense, which is going to include Carl Lawson at defensive end, John Franklin Myers at defensive end, Quinnen Williams at defensive tackle, and Sheldon Rankins at defensive tackle. And people immediately were like, what the hell are you talking about? Jermaine Johnson is a starter. Jermaine Johnson is a starter. Jermaine Johnson is a starter. I was like, yes, Jermaine Johnson is a starter when the Jets then go into their pass rush package, which could happen on second down, could happen on third. And this guy's going to play a shit ton of snaps, but in their actual 4-3 defense, he's not going to be the starter because they're going to take John Franklin Myers and they're going to put JFM in at defensive tackle, and they're going to have Carl Lawson at defensive end, Johnson at defensive end, John Franklin Myers at defensive tackle, and Quinnen Williams at defensive tackle. And that's going to be like their A1, 1A ace of a pass rush package. And it makes sense because John Franklin Myers can create more of issues inside. He's very much like Brandon Graham, Justin Tuck, where he can create more of issues inside, but he's not big enough to play run defense as a defensive tackle. Like he's just not. He's better on the outside and run situations, inside and pass situations because of how disruptive he is. So everyone was losing their mind. And I was like, guys, let's take it back a step, because you have to realize what Joe Douglas has done with this defensive line. Like, you have to realize just how much growth and talent he has infused into this defensive line. You can disagree with what I'm about to say, but this is just the way that it's going to work as long as Robert Saleh is the head coach. Saleh does not believe that it is possible, and we've said this on this podcast before, he does not believe that it is possible for defensive linemen, because of their size, to go 100 miles an hour and give maximum effort if they're on the field for 75 to 80 plays a game. He just doesn't believe that's possible. They have to, because of their size, go 70% on one play, or 80% on one play, or 65% on one play, because they need to regroup that stamina. They still go 100% more times than not, but they can't give it every single play because of how big they are, and it's just not possible. Like the Aaron Donalds are an anomaly, but honestly, if you talk to Saleh, he will pull up film where he says he's not 100% on this play. He's re-grabbing his energy. He's still a dominant player. At 70%. Yeah, but he's not 100. He'll show you he's not 100% on this play. He'll show you. Like he'll show it. Now he's so dominant on every other play. Who gives a shit if he goes 70% on this one? Because his 70% is still better than everyone else's 100%. But he's not doing it. So what Saleh wants to do, and it's what he did in San Francisco, and what he wants to replicate in New York, is that he wants to create a rotation where his defensive linemen, whoever is on the field, whenever they are on the field, they are able to give maximum effort. That's why Quinnen Williams, who was the Jets' best defensive player last year, was still only playing about 65 to 75% of the snaps, because Saleh's goal was, okay, we'll take him off to let him breathe on those other plays, put other guys on the field. But now when we put Quinnen back in, he's 100 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour. Okay, come off, get a breathe, 100 miles an hour, 100. It's like hockey shifts. And it's basically what he wants to create. Is he wants to create hockey shifts on his defensive line where you're out there, you're going 100 miles an hour, then you get your little breather, then you're back out there. Last year, the problem with the Jets was that when Quinnen Williams came off, or you had John Franklin Myers come off, or you had, who is the guy they signed that up? Shaq Lawson. You had Shaq Lawson come off. The Jets had all these, like, just another guys checking in. You had Tanzel Smart playing snaps. You had Nathan Shepard playing 55, 60% of the snaps. You had Tim Ward playing as another pass rusher to check in and be a pass rusher. You didn't really have, like, Saleh wanted this. He put the theory into practice, but he didn't have the players at his disposal. He didn't have the roster at his disposal to really make that idea and that concept work. Now, all these people who are like, Jermaine Johnson, why wasn't he your listed base starter? Who gives a crap? Because when the Jets trot out their defensive line in different pass rushing situations, the names at their disposal, Carl Lawson, Jermaine Johnson, John Franklin Myers, Sheldon Rankins, Quinnen Williams, Bryce Huff, Jacob Martin, Michael Clemons, Vinny Curry. Like, the list goes on and on and on. And I'll be honest with you, I probably missed one. Like, there's so many of these guys. I got to bring up the story because I wrote it the other day. And every time I went down the roster, I was like, oh, I got to add this name. Oh, I got to add this name. Oh, I got to add this name. Because it really is like wholesale, top to bottom. Apparently, I'm not signed into the Athletic, so I can't bring up the story that I wrote the other day to, like, list their entire defensive line.
I had it, and I literally just deleted it, or just X'd out of it. But okay.
Yeah, so I have to do the whole login thing, and I don't think it's going to work. But when you look at this defensive line, the Jets have now officially created Robert Saleh's dream scenario. And obviously, if you ask him, he's going to tell you, like, no, we still need more. No, we still need pay. Like, he's like Joe. Joe can never have enough offensive linemen. Robert can never have enough defensive linemen. But the defensive lineman at his disposal, dude, it really is just, I finally got it up here. All right, let's go down to defensive line.
I have it up too.
Yeah, so all right, good timing. So this is like, we were talking last year about guys like Tanzel Smart playing reps and Nathan Shepard playing a ton of reps and Shaq Lawson playing a ton of reps. Now the defensive line that the Jets are going to have rotating, because remember, you can only put 4 of these guys on the field at one point in time. The rotation that these guys are going to have Carl Lawson, Quinnen Williams, Sheldon Rankins, John Franklin Myers. There are your starters, right? All of those guys can rush the passer. Carl Lawson, John Franklin Myers, Quinnen Williams are probably capable of 8+ sacks every single year themselves. Sheldon Rankins is a 5 to 6 sacks guy. You then go to the bench behind them. You've got Jermaine Johnson, Bryce Huff, whom the Jets absolutely love, Jacob Martin, who they signed, Vinny Curry, Micheal Clemons. Like this
Solomon Thomas, who they signed too.
Yeah, so he's more run stuffer than pass rusher. But yeah, Solomon Thomas is in there as well. Like they have this insane rotation of guys who can just go and attack and get the quarterback. And it's wild. And Clemons is just another one thrown into the mix. He's another guy out there. And again, he's got to make sure he stays healthy. He has to make sure he stays out of trouble when he's on the field and when he's off the field. But as long as he does those two things, it's another first or second round talent who the Jets have just tossed into this defensive line. It's wild. It is absolutely wild. And what really takes this to the next level and really elevates this to the next level is that the past solid defenses relied on their defensive line to get home to alleviate the pressure of the cornerbacks. That's the way that he structured his defenses. You had the defensive line and you had the rangy safeties. And as long as you had the defensive line and rangy safeties, you didn't need dominance on the corner position. The Jets last year, Breece Hall, Brandon Echols, Michael Carter were their 3 cornerbacks. The Jets this year have Sauce Gardner as a starter. They have DJ Reed as a starter, and they have Mike Carter in the nickel. Those 3 corners are capable now of causing the quarterback to hitch. They have the ability to lock onto the receivers in man or zone coverage to the point where when the quarterback wants to throw it now, he's got to say, hold on, he's not there. Let's go to 2. And when he goes to 2, that hitch, that's all the time that the pass rush is going to need to get home. So the Jets now have perfectly, over the course of the last 2.5 years, married their pass rush with their secondary. And they're going to make, I was going to say beautiful love. And I was like, is that appropriate? That's probably your love. They're going to make beautiful pass rushing love.
Music.
Quarterback.
Music.
Yeah. Start the music. Yeah. Start the, give some, Let's Make Love Tonight. Start playing.
No. They're going to make beautiful music, you could say.
Oh, I thought Marissa wanted background music.
Marissa's cleaning things up,
setting the face. Like, yeah.
The G version. Come on, we got kids listening to this podcast.
No, I'm sick of it. Yeah, no, they're fine. They've probably had the birds and the bees talk. I think kids have that in like kindergarten now. I waited a while. I don't think that's the case anymore.
Connor as a dad.
I'm going. The pass rush in this secondary is going to make beautiful quarterback ruining love every single Sunday, and they really have as long as they stay healthy, because you got to tip your hat to Joe Douglas. You got to tip your hat to Robert Saleh. And we wrote the story on The Athletic a while ago about the way that they changed their overall draft philosophy, how that meeting of the minds where Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh had every single one of his coaches on staff give a meeting and a presentation to every single scout and front office executive about exactly the type of player that they need to make their scheme work. And it changed the way that the Jets scout, and it changed the way the Jets going into this thing. And it happened before when Saleh was hired. So it's been the 2021 and 22 drafts when it's been happening. You can now see it coming together. And obviously these kids are super young. They're going to make a ton of mistakes and they got to develop. But if they develop and if they reach their potential, you see the makings of just really, really, really good things here in New York. Obviously, it all comes down to Zach Wilson, but from a talent perspective around him, the Jets have created an environment where they can help Zach on defense, and they sure as hell can help him on offense.
All right, let's talk about offense a little bit then, and the line, because going into this draft, we thought, number 4, who knows? Maybe it pans out that they end up with Icky there. They go offensive line early on, and then suddenly you're thinking, well, there's definitely a lack of faith in what's going to happen with Mekhi Becton. Mekhi Becton made out pretty well in this draft, all in all, when you look at it. Obviously, they get Mitchell at 111. But that said, there's definitely going to be pressure on Becton this season to get it going, right, Connor? I mean, there was a chance that he would have been like the backup heading into training camp, depending on how this draft worked out. Now he's still the guy, but obviously he needs to step up if this team is going to get to the goals they want to reach in 2022.
Yeah, I think this is like when you look across the every position on the Jets roster, quarterback, running back, receiver, offensive line, defensive line, cornerback, safety, you kind of see the ceiling of potential and you see the basement, right? And I think that for the only 2 positions where the basement is significantly low, like where like the boom or bust potential is so high, is you have quarterback, just because obviously we haven't seen it from Zach Wilson yet. You believe you are. The Jets are hell-bent in their belief, but you haven't seen it with your eyes to be like, yeah, this kid's a franchise quarterback. So there's obviously, like, when you don't know, you're going into a season with a lower basement. Like, I think he's going to be fine, but like it's a lower basement. The other one that is a substantial and, in my opinion, more alarming basement, more alarming floor, more alarming, what's going to happen here, is the offensive line. Because if all things go according to plan for the Jets, and this thing goes how they hope it's going to go, they are more than fine on the offensive line, because it means that George Fant is going to pick up exactly where he left off at. And despite the fact he's now into his 30s, he hasn't played that much football at all. I'm not even talking about snaps. Like, in his life, he hasn't played that much football. So he's going to be even better in 2022 than he was in 2021. So you're set at left tackle. You know, Laken Tomlinson's a Pro Bowl guard. You believe Vera Tucker's a Pro Bowl guard. You really like what you got in Connor McGovern. So you're set there. And then obviously, if everything goes according to the Jets' way, Mekhi Becton comes back in shape, motivated, dominant, and returns and shows the Pro Bowl potential and flashes the Pro Bowl potential that everyone thought he had when he was the 11th overall pick in the draft. That offensive line right there, 1 through 5, is, if it goes that route, has a chance to not be average, not be above average, but be a very good offensive line. Like, collectively, that group has the chance to, I don't know if it's to the point where we're like, wow, they're one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, but they would be top 10 in the NFL. So if top 10's best, yeah, then best. I don't think they're top 5, but I think they would be top 10 in the NFL if that all goes according to plan. The problem is that if it doesn't go according to plan, George Fant, throughout the tenure of his NFL career, go back to his days in Seattle, he's never been an overly durable player. Like, we talk a lot about Mekhi Becton's durability, and we're going to talk a lot about Mekhi Becton's durability in a second here, but George Fant hasn't been overly reliable. Last year was the best year of George Fant's career, and he still was never great. I don't even think he was good. I would say he was average to slightly above average. The Jets' infatuation with George Fant, the coaching staff's infatuation with George Fant, has kind of elevated and inflated just how good last year was. He wasn't Jonathan Ogden, right? He wasn't Joe Thomas. Like, he was like just competent. Like, I think he was a solid left tackle. And because he was solid, that was viewed as like this unbelievable season for a left tackle because of how many issues the Jets have had on the left side of their line. That's a big issue, where if he regresses to the mean or he gets hurt again, then you go to the other side with Becton, which we've talked about a lot. The guy's weight has ballooned to over 400 pounds in both year 1 and year 2 of his NFL career. He has not stayed healthy in year 1 or year 2 of his NFL career. There were performance concerns last year throughout the length of training camp, to the point where Mike LaFleur called him out publicly, which were not related to his health, which were not related to his weight. That was when he was in shape for the Jets, and he was still struggling immensely. The Jets believe, and they had a very honest conversation with him during their exit meetings, they believe that they've motivated him to the point where he's going to come back like a bat out of hell. They think that him having this baby is also going to help him mature to another level. The concern, though, is that if Becton doesn't, and the weight issues persist, or the durability issues persist, or the durability issues are fixed and the weight issues are fixed, but the performance issues come back, the Jets don't have anyone behind these two guys to solidify and fix the offensive line, to stabilize it. Last year, they had Morgan Moses. So when Fant had his career year, and that was like, okay, cross that one off, we're not worried about it. But then Becton imploded. They were able to plug and play Morgan Moses and put Morgan Moses out there. So now you had Fant and you had Moses, and that stabilized the grouping. There's no Morgan Moses this year because Mitchell's not going to be Morgan Moses as a rookie. Right. Chuma Adaga is bad at football. Connor McDermott is bad at football. And there was another guy who, like, the Jets solid name dropped him the other day. I was like, dude, really? Like, we're really going to bank the fate of the future on this kid? I forget his name. I gotta look it back up on the offense. I have my depth chart here. Let me scroll right on up. I think it might have been Isaiah Williams, actually. I think that might have been the guy he name dropped. But you don't have that proven player to fill in. Now, I talked to somebody in the building about this, and Joe actually said it after the draft ended as well. Every single year when teams finish the draft, they look at their roster and they say, okay, we drafted this guy at this position. Why the hell are we paying this guy this much money? Let's cut the veteran. Let's go with the rookie. That's what happened with Washington when they let Morgan Moses go, and then the Jets were able to sign him on June 25th, which is a date I'll never forget. Because if I ever forget it, I think I'll probably be slapped very hard. But the Jets were able to sign him on June 25th. they are hoping that a similar offensive lineman is let go in a similar situation. A player was drafted, the veteran's cut, he's freed, he's now available, where they can go and get their proven veteran left tackle. If they are able to do that, the basement of the offensive line's potential is elevated significantly. I mean, we're talking like rancher status if they're able to get a veteran behind these guys, because you're now going to have this situation where, okay, we're hoping that George Fant's going to be a stud and Mekhi Becton's going to be a stud. And if these two guys are studs, boom, we got Fant, Tomlinson, McGovern, Vera, Tucker, Becton, a top 10 offensive line in the NFL. But if one of those guys goes down, if Fant goes down and he regresses to the mean, or Becton goes down and he struggles, the Jets will have that veteran, that Morgan Moses type, behind those starters to then put in and stop it. You know, it's not necessarily like a Band-Aid over the hole. It's legit spackling the hole, and you're fixing the hole, and you're going to be like, okay, we can now move on with this thing. So right now, my concerns with the offensive line, with Becton, with everything like that, is just because you're banking so much on hope with very little that you've seen, and you don't have anything behind them, because we are one injury away from Connor McDermott protecting Zach Wilson's blind side. We are one injury away from Chuma Adaga coming in and playing meaningful reps on the offensive line at left tackle or right tackle. That's a problem. That's a concern. That can take all these good feels that we feel about the Jets and just flush them right down the toilet. So over the next couple of weeks before we get to training camp, I think it's imperative that the Jets go out there and find a way to add a proven, veteran, established offensive lineman in the Morgan Moses mold behind these guys, so that if something happens, if their faith in these two guys isn't rewarded, they have the insurance policy behind them. Because right now there is no insurance policy. I mean, they're driving a BMW right now that they have no insurance on, and if you get scratched, you're paying for all that out of pocket, and that's not a good thing. I think I dropped a career record in analogies just now, by the way. I really think I did.
Definitely.
Yeah. I was Morgan Moses, Connor, and Bree forever tied.
I said that to Joe. I had to text him after the draft because I told him I don't think he picked it. He was so like killed by the he was so obviously tired from it all. I thought I was tired. I can't imagine how those guys felt. I told him, like, when we were at the draft, I asked him about like this. I asked him the question like about like, are you guys looking to the veteran market for like a lineman? And I was like, you know, like last year you guys were able to sign Morgan Moses, although, you know, to be honest with you, probably could have done that a day earlier or a day later. It didn't have to be on that day. And he just took the question stride. He's like, yeah, you know, we are looking for that. I told him later, I was like, dude, I was like, you know, it's like you signed. And he knew because he texted me on my wedding day. Like he said, like, hey, you know, congratulations, like, you know, congratulations, blah, 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 getting married. So he knew, like, obviously he signed the guy and then said it. But I was like, hey, just so you know, I made that joke. And he goes, oh, damn it. He goes, I didn't pick up on it. So you can tell those guys were in. He's not Mr. Coffee, man. He's not Mike McCagnon, who was wired at all hours of the day. I think he was ready to go home and sleep.
Well, I know you're well rested now after the draft, because 3 times in this podcast you've said replicable, successful.
Yeah.
So
how about that? Well, I've been working on it. See, draft time comes and radio hits come. So I've had to say that like 27 times from random radio stations. So I think I've gotten pretty good at it now. Like I'm just going to go out and like bring it out in like my everyday life now with Bree. Like, yeah, Bree, I don't know if going to the grocery store is replicable like every day over the week. Maybe
I would like you to count how many times you drop that word before she
replicable
picks up on it. Yeah.
Well, she's in the other room and we're going to the gym after this. So she's definitely like, I don't think she's watching TV. So I think she's listening. She's probably listening to the podcast and now she's going to be on to me. So I'm not going to be able to do
it. All right. One last thing real quick. We talked about Becton and how, if anything, this draft helps out his stock with the Jets for now. What about the other side of things? Are there a couple guys on this roster that are just in deep trouble now after this draft? I mean, Michael P. Ryan jumps out off the page right after the running back. Maybe the tight ends. Who stands out to you as doomed, I guess?
P. Ryan, definitely. I mean, P. Ryan was doomed last year. I mean, it's just, he's a shame. Like, I know everyone's like, oh my God, the reason the 2020 draft sucked was because of Adam Gase. Like, it's not why. I mean, there were very few players. Like, that was just a bad draft from Joe Douglas. I'll be honest with you guys. Like, it was just a bad draft. He had a bad draft. He's now had 2 good ones, so it erases the first one. But P. Ryan is the one that sticks out for me more than anything else, just because he was drafted for a different scheme. I mean, he's not really a zone blocking running back. He doesn't have that much speed to get to the outside and then cut it up the hole. So I think P. Ryan is probably the one at running back that really sticks out to me on offense. At receiver, I would say probably Denzel Mims. I mean, I know I saw him working out, and the Jets obviously and Joe Douglas aren't going to be willing to give up on a 2nd-round pick yet. So I think they'll probably take him with them to OTAs and minicamp and potentially training camp. But he is somebody I could easily see dropped in training camp if he doesn't have a good summer. Because, I mean, look, right now he's 6th on the depth chart because you got Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, and Garrett Wilson above him. You got Braxton Berrios and Jeff Smith above him, so that's 5. So then that puts Denzel Smith in the talk with Rodney Adams, Tariq Black, and DJ Montgomery. So that's obviously not a great sign. So if he can't play special teams, he's going to have no role on offense. And the Jets are not going to do this thing like they did last year where they make him inactive all the time. They'll just cut him and move on from him, cut their losses, or they'll try to flip him for another. Rookie who is an early round rookie who's struggling, who they believe like a new environment might help him in a position of need. Tight end, I probably wouldn't feel too good if I was Trayvon Wesco. I think he might be gone. Lawrence Cager, I'm fascinated to see play tight end, but that's probably not a great sign for him either. And Kenny Yeboah, we'll see, because I talked briefly there about Jeremy Ruckert. He's a guy that he's going to be utilized this year, but he will be this team's starting tight end by the end of next season. By the end of 2022, by the end of 2023, you're going to have Jeremy Ruckert as this team's starting tight end. The Jets absolutely love him. They know that there's a lot of technique that they got to work on. They got to fine-tune his blocking a little bit, but his mentality of he can block, he can receive, he has the ability to catch the football, he has the ability to run routes. He just needs to be taught how to run routes, right? Like that's the whole thing, is he just needs to be taught these things. Once he is, they view him as a complete full package tight end who's going to jump CJ and going to jump Tyler Conklin probably by the end of his second year. So I would keep an eye on Ruckert because I think he's going to be like Breece Hall and Ruckert are probably my 2 favorite picks in this year's draft. Ruckert, I probably wouldn't have drafted because I would have gone elsewhere. But now that they have him and reading about him and doing some research on him, I think those 2 guys are going to be the 2 picks that we're going to talk. Like, look, we'll talk about Gardner being a great player, Johnson being a great player, Wilson. But I think when you talk about this draft, it'll be, wow, the Jets were able to get Breece Hall in the 2nd and Conklin in the 3rd. Holy crap, look what these guys are now. Like, I think those guys can be Ruckert. Sorry, yeah. What did I say? Ruckert?
Conklin.
Oh, I said Conklin. Yeah, sorry, Ruckert. Those are the 2 guys I really genuinely believe are going to be game changers, like legitimate game changers for him. Those are the ones I could see losing their jobs on the offense. Defense, Jabari Zuniga, this is probably the end of him. I mean, the fact that once they drafted Clemons is when I was like, all right, that guy's probably done now, which is, a shame because he was actually the player that when he was drafted fit that Justin Tuck, Brandon Graham type role, and he just hasn't come along at all. I don't see anyone at linebacker that would be a surprise cut. Cornerback, maybe Justin Hardy. I think that's probably the one that he's got a pretty big cap hit, and the Jets have a lot of young guys now where if those guys can step up and be special teamers, it wouldn't surprise me to see Hardy go. And then safety, it's all pretty wide open there. And then, kicker, we'll see. I'm fascinated to see the Zerline Pinheiro battle it out there.
That's our looking ahead biggest fights at training camp, right? Go with the kickers.
Yeah, I'll write that down and write it this week. I need a story to write this week, so maybe I'll do that. We got rookie minicamp
free
too.
agents. You got to do the UDFA breakdown.
Yeah, maybe.
Hey,
did they announce
Connor, write a full story.
The UDFAs matter too, Connor.
Yeah. Marissa knows. Just write a story on Zonovan.
Do you know? He's the all-name team. He is on the all-name team. You were correct.
I mean, the Jets.
I know his agent too. His agent's a great guy.
The Jets have such a great all-name team. 2 Wilsons. I'm sure you guys discussed this. 2 Carters. A Bryce Huff. Breece Hall. A Bryce Hall. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And Quincy and Quinnen Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that in one of the podcasts.
I hate to be a play-by-play guy.
Yeah.
I foresaw this in my career when I was in college and wanted to do play-by-play. I saw this situation coming. I was like, yeah, we're just going to go writing and talk on a podcast.
All right, good stuff. That's going to do it. We got to get going, but thank you as always for tuning in. You can join The Athletic for $1 a month for 6 months right now. Great deal. Get all the writing wrap-ups for the draft. Baseball season's going, basketball playoff, hockey playoff started last night. So $1 a month for 6 months, theathletic.com/can't wait. And we will be back with you with another episode.
Yeah. This is so small, but I just do find this very funny that it was 2 months ago that I remember writing during free agency about the Jets targeting a corner and how it was going to be DJ. Once they signed DJ Reed, it's DJ Reed on one side. And then on the other side, it was going to be a Hall, Eccles, Dunn open competition. And my phone and my Twitter, my mentions were just absolutely destroyed with, there's no way Hall is not this team starter. There's no way they're not starting Hall. It's Hall. Now, I'll be honest with you. I thought Hall was going to end up being the starter. It was just going to be an open competition. I think the Jets going out and drafting Gardner tells you all the public perception of Breece Hall and his past breakups and what he did compared to what the Jets actually felt inside that building was more dramatic than even I was led to believe. I knew they were yeah, he's an okay player if that, number 2, number 3. the fact they were able to now draft a guy and sign a guy, and now it's like, oh yeah, you'll see time if one of these guys goes down. Oof. And he's going to be competing for like that number 3, number 4 corner job because they love Eccles and they love Dunn. So that's going to be oof. Yeah, go on, close the show again. Sorry.
But you said good guy to have for depth. That's going to do it. We'll talk to you again next time.